A rancher adopted a silent orphan girl. He never expected that one day she'd save him and his ranch.
The dust of the frontier has a way of settling on everything: the cattle, the porch, and the hearts of those who work it. In the vast, unforgiving stretch of the American West, where the horizon feels like a promise and a threat all at once, lived a rancher named William. He was a man carved out of cedar and grit, with hands that knew the rough texture of hemp rope and the velvet heat of a newborn calf. His wife Martha was his anchor, a woman of quiet strength who could find beauty in a desert bloom. They had built a kingdom of grass and timber, but it was a kingdom without an heir. For years, the silence in their home was a heavy thing, a biological void that no amount of hard work or prayer could fill. The decision to travel to the coastal city's orphanage was born of a desperate hope. The orphanage was a gray, suffocating place that smelled of lie and lost possibilities. It was there they met Rosie. At 12 years old, she was a slip of a girl with eyes like a trapped hawk, amber, fierce, and flickering with a defiance that chilled the bones of the wardens.
Tell us where you're watching from. If these Western stories move you, please share, and subscribing helps us bring more stories to life.
Rosie didn't want a family. She had learned early on that family was just a word used by people before they disappointed you. She fought the adoption with every ounce of her small frame, hiding in the shadows of the laundry room and refusing to speak. But the owner of the orphanage, a man more interested in clearing a bed than the soul of a child, entrusted her to William and Martha. He saw the rancher's steady hands and the gold in his purse and decided the girl's protests were merely the tantrums of the ungrateful. The journey back to the ranch was a grueling affair. For miles, the only sound was the rhythmic creak of the wagon wheels and the occasional snort of the horses. Rosie sat in the back, huddled against a crate, her gaze fixed on the receding tracks in the dirt. She felt like a prisoner being transported to a new kind of cage. William, sensing the storm brewing in the girl's chest, finally broke the silence. He didn't turn around, kept his eyes on the trail ahead, and asked in a voice like shifting gravel, "What is it you're looking to do with your life, Rosie?" Most girls your age are thinking of ribbons, or perhaps how to avoid chores. Rosie's response was sharp, a jagged piece of glass thrown into the quiet air. "It depends on what you want me to do, sir. I've learned that folks like you usually have a list of tasks before you even have a name for the person doing them. Am I a cook, a milker, or just something to keep the dust off the furniture?" The girl was smartly, as the old-timers would say. Her wit was a defense mechanism, a blade she kept sharpened to keep the world at arm's length. William pulled the team to a halt. The sudden stillness of the prairie was deafening. He turned in his seat, his weathered face softening into an expression of profound sincerity. "Listen to me, and listen well," he said, his voice dropping to a low, steady rumble. "We didn't bring you out here to be a servant. We're not going to harm you, Rosie. In fact, if anyone in this territory so much as looks at you sideways, they'll answer to me. I'm your father now. In this life, that means I stand between you and the world. You're not a tool. You're a daughter." Rosie bit her lip, her armor cracking just a fraction. She wanted to scream that he was lying, but the honesty in his eyes was a weight she couldn't push away. When they arrived at the ranch house, Martha was waiting on the porch, her apron fluttering in the wind. There was no grand lecture or list of rules. Instead, Rosie was heartily welcomed with a bowl of warm stew and a room of her own that smelled of pine and fresh linens. It was the first time in her 12 years that she didn't have to share a blanket or fight for a crust of bread. The transition wasn't seamless. There were nights when Rosie woke up screaming from nightmares of the gray walls, and days when she tested William's patience with her stubbornness. But slowly, the frontier began to heal what the city had broken. True to his word, William enrolled her in the local schoolhouse the very next day. He wanted her to have the letters he lacked. Rosie proved to be an exceptional student, her clever mind devouring books on history, philosophy, and mathematics. But it was the ranch itself that truly captured her spirit. After her lessons, she would shed her school dress for buckskins and follow William into the fields. She learned the language of the herd, the low rumble of a contented cow, the sharp metallic scent of an approaching thunderstorm, and the raw grit required to brand a calf in the spring mud. She wasn't just a girl on a ranch, she was becoming the ranch. Years bled into a decade. The 12-year-old waif had transformed into a woman of 20, an expert in every sense of the word. She could outride any hired hand and read a ledger better than the town banker. She was the pride of William's heart, the daughter who had mastered the land as much as she had mastered her own destiny. But the West is a fickle mistress. Just as Rosie reached her prime, a shadow fell over the rancher's house. A brutal combination of a market collapse and a devastating drought sent the business into a downfall. The cattle were dying in the parched creek beds, and the bank was circling like a vulture. To make matters worse, William's health broke. The years of winter drives and broken bones finally took their toll, leaving him bedridden and growing old far too quickly. He lay in the darkened bedroom, his breathing labored, watching the empire he built crumble through the window. Martha was exhausted, her hands worn to the bone from nursing her husband and trying to keep the household together. It was in this crucible of despair that Rosie's true character shone. She didn't weep or retreat. She stepped into the gap left by her father's illness. "I've got the reins, Pa," she whispered one evening, pressing a cool cloth to his forehead. "You taught me how to handle the cattle, and the schoolhouse taught me how to handle the men who think they can cheat us. Rest now." Rosie took charge of the whole business with a ferocity that stunned the neighbors. She used her literacy and her cleverness to navigate the complex web of debt and trade. She negotiated directly with the railroad barons, using her knowledge of law and commerce to secure better shipping rates. She organized the remaining hands into a disciplined unit, driving the herd to higher ground where the grass was still green. For 6 months she lived on coffee and sheer willpower, acting as both the brawn and the brain of the operation. Slowly, the business was prospering once more. The rains returned, the market stabilized, and the ranch was saved from the auction block. As the pressure lifted, William's spirit seemed to revive along with the land. He eventually emerged from his sickbed, fit and fine enough to sit on the porch and watch the sunset. One evening, as the three of them sat together, the air thick with the scent of sage and success, William turned to his daughter. "You saved us, Rosie. You did more than any son could have done. Is there anything you want for yourself? A dowry? A trip to the east?" Rosie looked out at the vast horizon, her gaze resting on the massive timber barn that had once held their winter hay. "I remember being that girl in the wagon, Pa," she said softly. "I remember the fear of being illiterate and dependent on the whims of others. I want the orphan children of this territory to be self-dependent like me. I want to open a school right here, in our big barn. I want to give them a way to earn a livelihood so they never have to beg for a home." William's eyes filled with tears, true raw emotion from a man who had rarely shown it. He allowed him, and together, they set to work. They cleared the hay, built long wooden benches, and filled the rafters with books. The big barn was transformed into a sanctuary of learning. Rosie became the teacher she was meant to be, guiding lost souls toward the light of knowledge and the strength of hard work. She lived a long, happy life with her adopted parents, a testament to the fact that blood doesn't make a family, loyalty and love do. The ranch was no longer just a place of cattle and dust. It was a beacon of hope on the edge of the world.
If you enjoy our Western stories, consider subscribing. It really helps us keep creating more for you.